What's going on, guys? I am Gibbs. We are back. We are talking about North America playoff predictions. I haven't had time for a DFH locker room, and here's a quick note. It is 2:47 a.m. Thursday night / Friday morning. I am leaving for my flight in about an hour and 15 minutes. So I figured I would do some quick playoff prediction videos because I haven't had time to do a DFH locker room. So maybe this takes the place of it a little bit to help you guys out a bit. Right now we have on the screen Vindicator versus Take 3, a rematch. Coming up this weekend. This is from week 4, so I figured I'd play this in the background. We might not get through the whole thing, depending on how long I go, but I figured so you guys can watch something. If you want to watch this full video, check out the Rocket League Esports YouTube channel. They gave me the permission to cut this up a little bit and use it, but if you want to go watch it over there, head on over there. I'm also going to put this up as podcast form a bit, just so there's something on the podcast feed for a little while. So that's why I'm not playing any sounds in the background for this. And I'm not going to mention the games too much as we talk about what I'm going to talk about is my playoff predictions, but we'll get into that. So first off, the first bit of news, or the first thing that I want to talk about, is the playoff format. Basically, there's 2 rounds of playoffs. Top 2 seeds, they're automatically in the last round of playoffs, while the bottom 4 seeds, or the next 4 seeds, I should say, number 3 through 6, they are battling out this weekend to try and join the top 2 in the final 4, which will make you automatically a berth into the LAN, and then you're just playing for playoff seeds next week, of course, with some prize money as well. So this week, it's 3 through 6. It is a double elimination tournament. So we will be doing... basically, if you lose 2 best-of-5s, you're out. If you win 2 best-of-5s, you're in. It's basically a best-of-3 of best-of-5s between the 4 teams, if that makes any sense at all. Because we will not play out the full bracket here, since it's only 4 teams, and we're trying to find a number 3 seed and a number 4 seed. So, from the upper bracket, or the winner's bracket, you will get the number 3 seed, so they'll win 2 best-of-5s in a row, and they will move on as the number 3 seed, moving into the regional championships, as we're calling it. The 4th seed will be determined from the lower bracket, or the loser's bracket, so they will have to play an extra match. Like, they will lose one either in the finals of the winner bracket or even in the first round, and they'll have to win 2 best-of-5s to make it in on the lower side. And that'll leave 2 teams remaining, and that'll be your 2 spots to face off against number 1 and number 2. The regional championships is a single elimination bracket, a best-of-7 tournament. There will be a 3rd place game as well. This is for prize money and for seeding at the LAN. So if you're top in North America, you will face the number 4 in Europe in the first round of the LAN. So these matches are pretty important because you want to try and get as far as you can in the upper bracket when you go to the LAN before you get dropped down in the lower bracket. It means you'll have to play less games and maybe get some easier opponents as well. So that is what is on the line here. We're talking North America here, and I'm actually going to talk a lot about stats between common opponents. So, for instance, Genesis, I took their stats from the 3 opponents that they could possibly face during these playoffs. They will have to, at least at minimum, face 2 of these opponents, and they might even face all 3 depending on how the bracket works out. So I did this for all the teams that are in this, all the common games, so that'll be 3 best-of-5s for each of these teams, and just collected some stats, and I'm going to go over some stats, and then maybe try and defend the stats in some ways, or maybe not in others, of why I'm using them for my predictions. You'll probably hear some of this when I'm on the desk at RLCS. So, yeah. So, if you hear it again, thanks for watching, and watch some more. But we'll start it out. We're going to start out with Genesis. They went 3-0 versus these teams in this round of the playoffs. They went individual games 9-2. So, like, they did extremely well. Now, there's a couple of notes here. 2 of those games were in week 1. So, how much can you put on games that happened like a month and a half ago? Probably not too much. They played Vindicator without Matt back in week 1, and they won 3-1, but they actually got outscored in that series because Vindicator, they won the first game 5-0. So, this was the only series where Genesis got outscored, but something to note, sometimes goals don't matter that much after like 3-0. Teams are going to really press hard to try and get those goals back, and you might give up a few extra. So maybe we're looking into that 5-0, maybe a little too much, and it probably doesn't really mean all that much. But nonetheless, that's what happened. Then they also played Revival. They also won 3-1. A lot of close games, though, as well. And then they played Take 3 back in week 3, so that was 3 weeks ago. And they beat them 3-0. That was that 1 week where Take 3 just looked abysmal, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe that was week 2, actually, I think. But either way. So that's their stats here. But for goal differential, they finished +6 in those matchups. So again, that's not that much when you won 9 games versus losing 2. So right there alone, like say every game is a 1-goal game, you would have a +7 goal differential. So again, a lot of that is with the Vindicator 5-0. Their shot differential, though, is really, really good. They are +24, first by a long shot. They the next highest team is Vindicator at +5 in these matchups. So they did a really good job. What's really impressive from them, though, is their shots per game. They're only third best at 6.73 shots per game between all these teams. To note, I'm sorry, they were, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. Their shots per game were 7.64, which is not as much as you might expect from the best shots per game. They were actually first in that. I was actually reading the wrong stat. A lot of teams were really, really close. Like the lowest is 6.18. So all the teams were within 1.5 shots of each other. But Genesis coming out first in shots. The thing I really, really like from them is their shots against. 5.45 a game. That is insanely low versus these teams. And this is what Genesis excels at. And I will get to the one player that I think really, really does this well for Genesis. But just give me 1 second. 5.45 shots per game is the least between these teams. The next least is 7.23. And that is from Vindicator. So a huge gap between first and second. And really, Genesis is here because of their defense. They won 5 games by only scoring 2 goals out of their 9. Between all these other teams, like during these opponents, the only other team to win a game by scoring 2 goals was Vindicator versus Revival once. And they won 2-1, I believe, in that game. Genesis has won 5 of their games. Over half of their games, they have won by only scoring 2 goals, which is extremely impressive because it just shows how good their defense is. Now, one thing to note for stats, generally, when you look at stats, it's always going to favor the offensive side because the offensive stats are the ones that you'll see a lot. Now, the one stat that I'm not a huge fan of, I'm probably not a huge fan of saves. I'm also not a huge fan of assists all the time because assists sometimes are a little bit more random. But I do, with assists at least, it shows where the pressure began. And to me, that's still worth some note. But saves is probably not the greatest stat in the world because generally, like I always say, you don't want shots on your net, so you don't want saves. And this is the reason why I think the best player on their team right now is Pluto. So Espeon, he has all the stats. First in goals between these 12 players that make up these 4 teams. Now, I'm including Chrome in this, who we'll get to in a bit because he's not playing for Revival this weekend, but we'll get to that in a bit. Instead, Prem's going to be playing, but he has no stats, so I included Chrome in these stats. So Espeon, he had 1.45 goals a game. He also had 3.73 shots per game, which is also first, and then his shooting percentage was 4th. Now, I'm not saying like Espeon's not doing a lot for them. He's doing a really good job at 39% shooting percentage, 4th, really, really strong. But Pluto, his stats really don't say anything at all. Like 0.45 goals, he's 9th. Actually, I'm sorry, he's tied for 11th in that. I actually have a typo here. But so he's tied for last in goals per game. I'm pretty sure. I could be off with that one a little bit. I'll have to recheck that stat. His assists, he's 0.64, tied for 5th, so that's pretty good stat for him. 1.27 saves, he's 6th place. Okay. It's not amazing, right? 1.91 shots per game. He's 11th out of the 12 players. And then shooting percentage, 23.8%. He's ninth. Again, this is out of 12 players. So his best stat is 5th out of 12 players. So just over half, and that's in assists. So, and he's tied for that spot too, with Classics, actually, his teammate. So really, they're tied for 5th and 6th. So it's showing, like, his stats not looking that great. His best stat by far is that team against 5.45 shots per game. Pluto is that third man back. There's no question about it. Like on Genesis, they run a very 2-1 system where they keep Pluto back either on the walls or sometimes he moves up to midfield and cancels out clears, and that's where he excels. He's canceling out a ton of clears. He is not letting the pressure get onto Genesis. Instead, he's providing that next set of pressure or next set of plays for Espeon or Classics to start making from that midfield line or even off his back wall. He gets some really good clears off the back wall before shots are even allowed onto his own net. He's really preventing a lot on the defensive side of the ball, and I believe that's why they're the best defensive team, mostly because of Pluto. Of course, like it is a team effort. Like Classic stats are abysmal as well. They're actually worse than Pluto's. I believe Classics probably needs to step it up a little bit more on the offensive end, but what he does is he's more of a nuisance on the offensive side of the ball. He's kind of like an old Luchino in a way, except like Luchino would score as well, where he's just trying to bother the offensive side or bother on the offensive side, so not letting that defense get clears or not letting them get quality clears. And then it makes Pluto's job a lot easier on the defensive end if they have to like panic and hit it away from Classics and just clear it down the field like ping pong, and then Pluto just returns the favor right back. The only thing I wish Classics would do a little bit better, he's only got 0.64 assists. He's tied for 5th, as we said. He needs to get that up, and his shooting percentage is 22.70. He's tied for 11th, or I'm sorry, he's alone in 11th place, so that's second to last right now in shooting percentage. And I understand like you're being a nuisance on the offensive end, but you still should probably get that shooting percentage up a little bit. One thing I do like is generally, say you have a low shooting percentage, but then you want more assists, and he's doing okay in assists, 0.64, because you're getting those juicy rebounds for your teammates like Espeon. But I want to see him try and set up Espeon maybe even a bit more, or even just get more involved on the offensive end, because when he scores goals, Genesis is extremely scary, and they will probably win like 9 games out of 10 when Classic is scoring like as their main offensive threat, because Espeon will usually do it. The scary part is if Classics does his normal routine and then Espeon has a bad day. If Espeon has a bad day and his shooting percentage goes down further than 39%, or he just can't get those shots on net as often, then Genesis could be in trouble. That's why I want Classics as that backup plan to try and facilitate more of the offense when he can. Because right now he hasn't been doing an amazing job at that. And that's one weakness of Genesis compared to the top 2 teams. I feel like Classics is just not filling in that role well enough. I understand his role might be a little bit different than on most teams, but I think it has to change a bit to get Genesis a little bit more offensive pressure. Because again, they won 5 games by only scoring 2 goals. That's not going to happen that often when you're playing Energy or Exodus or Orbit, I should say. It's probably not going to happen that often because they know how to score, as we've seen before. So, a little worried there from Genesis, but I expect them to come through as the 3 seed, maybe lose to one other team that I'll talk about in a little bit. But Genesis's first game versus Revival should be a pretty easy one. Now, Revival, they are 1-2. They finished 5-6 though in individual games in these series. They lost to Genesis way back in week 1, so again, kind of hard to take anything from that. They beat Take 3 in week 2, which was their actual bad week. So again, that's a really long time ago. That's like over a month away. Or a month ago, I should say. So I'm not sure how much that series holds, but they did destroy them. They beat them 11-2 in 3 games, so that's pretty impressive there. And then they lost to Vindicator in week 4, so last week, which was, like, in my opinion, pretty convincing that Vindicator won it. That was a very important series for both teams. Extremely important. But, well, let me bring that back. It was really important for Vindicator. It wasn't as important for Revival. They already clinched at that point because they knew they had the tiebreaker over G2. So I'll give them to that. But of course, they want to win. They want to get higher seeds. But Vindicator came out really strong and beat them, I would say, pretty handily. Like 2 games were by 2 goals. 1 game was by 1 goal. And the 1 win that a Revival had was by 1 goal. So I would say it was pretty handily. Now, their goal difference is sitting at 2. They're like right in the middle of the pack. Shot difference -8. Again, right in the middle of the pack. That's what Revival does. They're just a team that's right in the middle of the pack. And basically every single stat, team-wise at least, shooting percentage, they're second at 35%. But they're really, really close to Vindicator at first. They actually have a pretty high shooting percentage compared to some of these other teams. Like Genesis, sitting at 31%. So a 4% increase is pretty good there. And then Take 3 is abysmal at 26.5%. So that's a pretty big increase. It's almost 10% versus Take 3. So that could come in handy if they can perform that way. Now, of course, Chrome is not playing. Prem is playing in his place. There was some team conflict, I think. Possibly, like, I think it was also just Hot Wizard and Geno Cop wanting to try something new, I believe. And the way it works right now in Rocket League is 2/3 rule, basically. Like, if you have, like, majority vote, then they can probably just take you out of the lineup. So they're going to try out Prem. We only saw Prem in that pseudo fake game versus NRG that was, that big controversy. So he looked okay in that game, but it was 1 game, so it's really hard to tell. From what I've seen, like, I haven't seen a ton from Prem, but from what I've seen of Chrome is a really solid player. I believe Prem is maybe slightly behind him, but again, it could all come down to team chemistry. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. You really can't say too much about individual skill because you want to see the team perform together. So that's a big question mark. But their stats for the full season for Revival, they're very similar stats between all 3 teammates. But then when you go to common opponent stats, Chrome actually leads the team in goals, 0.91. He also leads the team in saves at 1.64. And that's also first out of all players as well. So he was their main defense, or last line of defense, I should say, on the shots was Chrome. And then he also leads the team in shooting percentage. So that's a lot to lose. Plus, he was 3rd as well, and at 40%, which is a pretty high shooting percentage. So that's a lot to lose. He was also tied for the most shots per game on his team. So he was leading his team in a lot of stats, and that's going to be a lot to replace. Now, of course, like, some of that could just be happenstance, and, like, they've been pretty even throughout with Revival. So maybe that doesn't matter too much, but we'll see if that plays out, because Chrome was doing a pretty good job against these opponents in particular. So going to be a lot to make up. But again, like, they're very middle-of-the-road stats. Hot Wheel Sid actually has a ton of assists, 0.82, a second out of all these players. But at the same time, on the defensive end, he's only got 0.91 saves, and that's sitting at 10th out of 12. So he's trying to be that number 2 man, trying to set up plays. And from what I've seen from Revival, they're really good at getting assists. That's one thing that we know that they're really good at. Their team goals, 2.36. Their assists are at 2.09 per game. So almost every single goal, basically, is assisted, which is why I find it weird that they're subbing out Chrome. Because I feel like the team chemistry on the offensive side, when they do score, they score pretty well by passing to each other, and that's going to be hard to make up with Prem, like a new guy coming in. Of course, there's the whole honeymoon phase, and who knows, maybe they'll play really well because, like, they'll be a little bit more carefree because pressure's probably not on them as much. Like, obviously they want to go to LAN, but at least, like, most people are counting them out at this point, so that might help them a lot. I don't expect them to do much here. They might beat a team like Take 3, depends on what Take 3 shows up. I also just want to watch Prem play. Like, I just want to see how the team chemistry works with Prem and see why they made this choice. Now, of course, like, they went 2-5 on the regular season, so they didn't have a great season. They had a lot of close sets against some of these teams. So they're here for a reason, that's for sure. Like, they almost beat NRG, and they've had close games here or there, but we'll see. Like, even when they played Genesis, it was pretty close. So, but that was way back in week 1. I'm just questioning the roster change. Seems like a bad time to do it. But, again, I'm not on the team, so who knows. I just want to see what they do. Like, they're the biggest question mark to me, like, out of all these teams. They could surprise, and they could make it, because honestly, throughout the entire season, I didn't think that they were going to do anything at all. And they actually showed up a little bit more than what I even thought they were going to do. So maybe they'll do the same here and surprise me. But I don't expect them to make it, but we'll see. We'll see. Next up, we got Take 3. So as you see right here, we're watching Take 3 versus Vindicator. That's going to be a rematch in the second game of the weekend. And I absolutely hate Take 3 as a team. I cannot stand them. They are so inconsistent, it's absolutely insane. They will have weeks or times, not even weeks, where they'll have like a good offensive series or they'll like start scoring and then they'll just be just awful. They had a stretch during the regular season where they played 11 games and they scored 8 goals. Like, that's just horrible. And I just can't trust them in between sets. They seem to be very like off and on. Like I think it was week 3, they got swept by Genesis 3-0. Pretty handle. Well, like I shouldn't say handily. Like it was a 2-1, 2-0, and then 3-2. So they did battle back a little bit with the 3-2. But then they just go on and blow out Deception. Like they just like outperformed Deception and got the 3-0 right back. And now like Deception is obviously a worse team than Genesis, but they did really show their offensive presence at that point. But their stats are abysmal in common games. They lost to Revival 3-0 in week 2. They lost to Genesis in week 3 3-0. And then they beat Vindicator in this series that you're watching right now, spoilers, 3-2, which was a game that didn't matter much. Both teams wanted to win, of course, but it didn't really matter much in the grand scheme of things. But their stats are just so bad, and like they just can't get anything going on the offensive end. It's hard to watch sometimes when we see them play. They don't really do much. Like I believe their series in week 1, I think they were really beneficial that they got to play Kings of Urban, who is now Energy, as like Kings' only game, and Take 3 got to warm up versus G2. They also got to play a worse off G2, barely beat G2 3-2, and then they got warmed up really well, and then Energy might have took it for granted a bit and lost that series basically with a fluke 10-second goal or 10 seconds left in Game 5. And like out of all these teams, like I have no confidence in Take 3 whatsoever. Hopefully they prove me wrong, because they have proven it before where they can play well. But like even going back to last qualifier, they always seem to collapse in the last week of qualifiers and then wouldn't make playoffs. And now we're in regional playoffs. Sure, they made top 6 out of top 8. But I want to see if they can make that next step, make it to the LAN. But once again, we'll go over the stats real quick. Sorry, I should have went over them before. But 1.64 goals per game is the worst out of these 4 teams in common games. They are in last by a long shot. Basically, second is a tie at 2.36 with Revival and Genesis. So right there, that, if I do my math really quick, is 0.72, I believe, behind in goals. And then first is 2.69. So they're pretty close. It's like, well, that's like 0.6 off as well from Vindicator. But that's a big, big gap. They're 1.03 goals per game less than Vindicator, who they're playing. They did show up here in this set. This is one of the sets where they actually did show up. I just don't know if they'll do it again. It's hard to tell with them. But they're also, like, they're the worst in every single stat. For a team, for the stats that I track, we have goals per game against. They're at 2.82. They're in last. Assists per game even, which I don't really care about the stat too much, but they have the least assists. They give up the most. Then they have the most saves, which I wouldn't necessarily say is a good stat, and they give up the least saves. Again, not the greatest stat. Shots per game, they have the least at 6.18, and they let up 8.09 shots per game. And these stats are all versus common opponents, so the other three teams in this playoff. And then their shooting percentage, 26.5, they are also in last. Goal differential, minus 13, last. Shot differential, minus 21, last. I go on and on and on. They just haven't been looking good. Their one shining player, surprisingly, because Insolences, I felt like had a pretty quiet season, but I guess versus these three opponents is when he showed up the most. 0.91 goals per game. He showed up a lot in this last series versus Vindicator. As you can see right there, he just scores another one. He did show up a lot in that series, which benefited him a bunch in his goals per game stat. He was third among the 12 players. But then Zane and Rizzo, 0.36 goals per game. They are tied for last out of every single player. They need to get more offensive going somewhere along the lines. Like, Insolences will need help. I believe Zane is that key. I think Zane's the key of this whole thing. Rizzo hasn't been playing as well. Like, if Rizzo can start getting those highlight plays like he had in week 1, then I think they have a good shot as well, and I think their morale will go up a lot, and that might help them play really well. Zane's that setup man, which I think he can really set up Insolences and Rizzo probably a lot more than the other two can set up players. But we haven't seen it from him. I thought that's what Zane was going to come in and do a little bit more, and he really hasn't shown it as much. He's actually last in assists for his team, at least with 0.27. Insolences is right behind him, 0.36, and Rizzo's the one setting up some plays, 0.55. I'm not surprised Rizzo's up there. He's not getting the goals, but at least he's getting the assists, so that's something. Zane, though, he's 11th in goals and assists. That's just awful. So I want to see a little bit more from him. Saves per game, they save a lot of shots. Not necessarily the greatest thing, but Insolences and Rizzo are tied for first among all players, so they know how to get back on the defensive end. But it also shows that, like, Zane is kind of being that middleman. He's not usually back on the third line for defense, so he's probably trying to set up some plays. Maybe he gets that third assist or that second assist that we don't keep track of if you want to talk about hockey terms. So it could be some of that. But 14% shooting from Zane Jackie is dead last. He has the fourth most shots as well right now, but he's just not putting them on target or like in good spots, I should say. Because one thing, again, like if you have a lot of shots and you have a low shooting percentage, I want to see a lot of assists. Because usually you'll give up like a juicy rebound from the defense and then your teammate will come in and finish it off. But he's not even getting that at 0.27 assists, so we'll see. Insolences is shooting really, really well in these series. Again, we see another goal from him here, setting up from Rizzo. At 41.7%, he's second among the 12 players. Rizzo also not shooting that great at 23.5%. He's getting some assists, though, at least from it, but they definitely have to get more accurate shots, which probably means that they need to set up plays more. They haven't been really working as a team all that much. It's a lot more ping-pong game from Take 3 from what I've seen, and then some weeks they just look absolutely horrible. Hopefully this is not one of those weeks for them because they really need to show up and get a shot at the land. Like if they show up again and beat Vindicator, they have a really good chance because I believe it's going to come down to Vindicator or Take 3. We might even see them play twice because we'll probably see Vindicator or Take 3. Whoever wins that plays Genesis. If Genesis wins that and the loser beat Revival, we'll see a rematch. So we might see them play each other twice, and it'll matter for the second time who makes it in. So I just don't think that they can keep up with Vindicator's offense in 2 best-of-5s. They did here, so they could prove me wrong, but I still think Vindicator looked like the better team most of the time throughout this series. Vindicator's offense has been really, really strong at 2.69 goals per game. They're first. Assists at 2.31, so they're assisting most of their goals, which I like to see. And then shots per game, they're in second, just behind Genesis. But shooting percentage, they're at 35.4. And if you remember Lucky Bounce, with Darkfire and Torment, they were the best shooting percentage team and the best offense in Qualifier 2. And they're starting to do that again here. And Matt's come in really strong in weeks 3 and 4. He's really showed that he can be a key component of this team. In week 3, he was averaging over a goal per game plus one assist per game, which no one else was doing in the entire league. But he didn't keep that up in week 4. But still doing a really good job. Their goal differential and shot differential are both at 5. They're in second for those stats. And then, so like that's pretty good. And a lot of that comes from that 5-0 win they had against Genesis. Because they actually beat them in goal differential like in that series. Because Genesis, they only won, I think, 2 of their games by 2 goals. I think every other game was by 1 goal. So Vindicator can blow out teams at times with their high-powered offense. Their main, my main concern for them is their defense. With Matt, they've had a lot of times where like 2 or more players go up for the same defensive play, and if they wind up with a bad clear, then they just give it to their opponents for an easy shot. They're in third right now for goals per game, like against at 2.31. And a lot of that comes down to just them trying to go for the same balls in defense. If they can fix that, I believe they could even beat Genesis. I really like this team. They've been playing really well. They've had some close sets where they barely lost. I think it was both. Like in this set, they lost Game 5 overtime, and they lost to G2 Game 5 overtime, and their 2 losses in the most recent weeks. They look really strong. I really, really do like them. Darkfire's a beast. Again, he's leading the league in shooting percentage for common opponents at least with these 12 guys at 45%. His goals are second at 1.08. His assists are even third at 0.77. So Darkfire is getting the job done on the offensive end. And then Matt has been playing pretty well on the defensive side as well. He's got 1.56 saves in fourth. He's still getting a lot of shots, though. The entire team is getting a ton of shots. They are second, third, and fifth in shots. So we got Matt in second at 2.78. Torment right behind him, 2.77. And then Darkfire, 2.38 in fifth. So they know how to put offensive pressure on. They just have to be a little bit careful. They're very similar to me to Energy, who puts on a lot of offensive pressure, but then they tend to give up a lot of goals because of it, because they get a little too antsy. Like here, they were up 2-0 in Game 5, and then they gave up some easy goals because they're trying to do a little bit too much on the offensive end. Maybe slow it down, play a little bit more defense. Like if they can start playing a little bit more defense when they get one of these leads, I don't think they can lose to these teams to at least take 3 or Revival. We'll see. But I do really, really like them. Matt has been a huge addition. So I thought actually before they even started, when they lost Squishy Muffins, I figured Matt was going to be the one coming in. But from what I heard is Matt wasn't playing a lot then. Maybe some real life stuff was going on. So he wasn't playing a lot of Rocket League. Because like, I thought like, on Selfless he was probably their best player. And I still consider him a really, really solid player in the North America scene. But they went with Lethamir. And then they even went with Karma before going to Matt. And now with Matt it seems like things are clicking really well. At the same time, we're unclear how Karma would have played. They played Energy, and like the whole team looked really bad in that series. So I don't want to say necessarily it was necessarily Karma's fault, but Matt probably just outplayed in other scrims and stuff like that. Matt has been doing a phenomenal job on all sides of the field, basically. He's fifth in goals, 0.78 in common opponents again, 0.56 in assists in seventh, and saves per game 1.56. Now, when they lost to Genesis back in week 1, they didn't have Matt. And then they beat Revival in week 4. And they played Take 3 in week 4. So they played 2 of these opponents just 2 weeks ago. And I think that really shows some stuff here. Like, we see that they lost to Take 3 here in 5. It's a really close set. I think that one could go either way. I consider, like, I would say Vindicator wins 7 out of 10 series against Take 3. And then they beat Revival pretty handily, and now Revival's using a sub. We'll see how that goes. So I think they're going to be at least in that last game to decide who gets that 4th seed. If not, just make it in through the winner's bracket. I really do enjoy their play. And, yeah, I believe Vindicator is my team to watch out for. I think they, like, if they can fix their defensive issues from time to time, like, it even doesn't happen that often. It's just here or there. They have some shaky defense where 2 of them will go for the same ball. Usually, it won't matter too much right here. We just saw Torment and Darkfire go for the same ball. But they always have that third man really pushing up really hard. And if he gets beat, then they get in trouble. If they can clean that up just a bit and keep that offensive pressure, because the problem is sometimes like you clean up on the defensive end and then you lose that offense. So if they can find that magical solution where they only have one guy going for the same ball, but they keep their same pressure generally, then I think they're going to be a really hard team to beat. They could come in with the 3 seed. You know what? I'm just going to lay it out there. I'm going to predict Vindicator, number 3 seed. Genesis, the number 4 seed. Take 3, number 5. Revival, number 6. And that'll do it for my predictions for North America. Should be a fun weekend. I hope you guys enjoy it. I was going to do a Europe one as well, but this one actually ran really long, and I have to get ready for my flight. So, apologize for the Europe people, but we're only going to get one in. And, yeah. So, apologize for that. We're going to play the rest of this game out. I'll just continue to banter here a little bit. Come check me out on the desk Saturday and Sunday. I'll be on all day talking about playoffs, talking about matchups, and there's the goal from Insolences to secure the win. He had a hell of a series during this the series versus Vindicator, and they Take 3 needs at least one of their players, probably Insolences or Rizzo, to have one of those great MVP series that we know that they can have, to have a shot here to make top 4 in my mind. But if you think otherwise, let me know, guys, in the comments. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Later.